Well, while those are trickling in, I might start us off. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Dan Trevanion. I'll be the moderator. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of land upon which we are virtually meeting from various places. I'm appearing from Gadigal land in Sydney, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today, I'm excited to hear from our distinguished panel. We have Rebecca Hall, Deeds Legowo, and Willix Halim. Please look at their profiles for their very distinguished careers and backgrounds. But I think we might just get straight into it, and I might start with Rebecca. Could you please start us off with your thoughts on our webinar topic, IA-CEPA opportunities for young Australian and Indonesian entrepreneurs?
Fantastic, Dan. Thank you for welcoming us all here today. And can I echo your acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land upon which we are all meeting, albeit virtually. I'm coming to you from Brisbane and from Turrbal land here in Brisbane. And I also want to just thank the panel members. I do a lot of webinars. I've lost count of how many I've been involved in this year. Every one of them is a great opportunity to connect, but I'm really excited about today's conversation. I will just do a quick 20-second intro on what my job is, because I think that will make sense as to the angle that I'm taking here today. So I am Victoria's new Commissioner to Southeast Asia and would usually be based in Jakarta. Hope to be there plan to be there in 2021. And my job is to connect our trade, investment, education, and I'm adding a fourth part to that, innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems to deliver value for Victoria and for, in this case, Indonesia, but also I work across 11 countries in the region. So my views on this, I have three first points I wanted to kick off with. One is I work in government, so IA-CEPA free trade agreements mean a lot to me, and I, from a government perspective, can see the significant value that they offer in terms of not only market access, but also confidence in our commitment to the relationship. But I acknowledge that many on the call, given the virtue of this topic, are entrepreneurs or are budding entrepreneurs as well. And so I think it's really important that we all have a role in finding where we take a government legal document and construct and find the opportunities in our own space. And for me, we're seeing already huge opportunities in the skills agenda, in agriculture, in dairy, and what was the other one that I was just talking about the other day, in broader services and investment. So that's number one. We really want to unpack it. This is not another webinar where I'm going to go through line by line on the chapters and what it means, because the second part, I think, is ecosystems. We talk about innovation or entrepreneurship ecosystems, and we are so lucky in Victoria to have significant investment. I'm biased, but the facts are there, significant investment in our entrepreneurship ecosystem. And the opportunity, I think, is how do we connect those two ecosystems, what's happening in Victoria with our partners and ecosystems in Indonesia. So I'd love to hear some thoughts on that today as well. I think my third point in just setting the scene here, and one of the things that we are focused on is as entrepreneurs and innovators, I'm sure you're always looking for the problem. What's the problem and how can you solve it? And I do think we have more in common than we have differences, and finding those common solutions, I think, is not going to be too far if we approach it with the right kind of entrepreneurial mindset, if we approach it with the recognition of a role of government, a role of industry, and importantly, a role of education and each of us. So that's my kickoff. I hope I haven't taken too much time in that, but really looking forward to hearing the comments from the other panel members and addressing some questions as well from the audience.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rebecca. And you've set the scene very nicely. For Willix, I might invite you next. You're someone who's studied in Australia. You're working now in Indonesia, an iconic company. So when we're talking about connectivity and having more in common, I think you're an example of that. What are your thoughts on the webinar's topic today?
Yeah, I think it's a great topic, considering that the relationship between both countries have been great. I graduated from Melbourne Uni. I did a 5-year degree, mechatronics and computer science. After that, I became a developer for 1 year in Sydney, and then I decided to join a company with my boss at the time, freelancer.com, which is a tech company. We managed to turn that public. And work with a lot of the tech engineers in Sydney. After that, decided to go back to Indonesia. Went back to Indonesia. I think it was about 4 years ago, and worked with. I guess in a sense became the late co-founder of Bukalapak at the time. With the 3 founders, and started to find ways to grow the company. And to be honest with you, I think the second largest universities that we hire from, apart from obviously University of Indonesia and ITB, it'll probably be Melbourne Uni, where I came from. So in Melbourne, in Buka itself, Bukalapak itself, we obviously have multicultural people in the company as well. A lot of Australians, a lot of Australian Indonesians, a lot of Indonesians who were educated in Australia. So having that network, I think, really helps. I've learned quite a bit of, I guess, the culture of Australia as well. I've been in Australia for almost, I think, almost 10 years, if not more. So started to get a feel about how to become Australian. Started liking cricket, which I think I'm probably the only person. I'm probably the only Asian, non-South Asian that knows cricket and loves cricket, and actually very full on being a big fan of it. And I think but again, I think the part of the things that being able to connect between Australia and Indonesia really helps in terms of the entrepreneurial part as well. And I think the entrepreneurial sense, and there's something that I think no one has done quite a bit as well, is that there's no startups that connects both. And hopefully, with the chapter like IA and a few others, will be able to see some sort of company or startup connecting to that. So very happy to be in this panel. I'm not entrepreneur, I guess, in a sense. I've always find a company that I like to work with, and be able to and lucky enough being able to learn from it, and also apply what I learned, and being able to grow it to the state where it is now. So yeah, Buka is, when I came, I think Buka was about 250 people, and now it's about 2,000 people. Our sales, we're doing about almost $900 million now in sales every month. And these are the things that will keep growing, looking at internet penetrations and stuff like that. So love to share with you guys about what we've learned in terms, especially in the tech business. But yeah, quite excited. I'm very excited about the panel and the questions that will come as well.
Thank you, Willix, and we're very excited to hear from you as well. I'm surprised that you don't call yourself an entrepreneur, but maybe that leads us well to Deed's, where I would call you an entrepreneur. If you look at Deed's background, she's done many fantastic things, and her journey's taken her a lot of places at a very young age. Deeds, what are your thoughts on our webinar topic today?
Hey, Dan, and thanks, Aya, for having me. You guys are welcome to call me Deeds, Dee, or Diletta. That's the name on paper. And before I kick off, I just want to say and acknowledge that I am dialing in from Melbourne and speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I'd like to pay my deep respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. All right. Well, I am mega passionate about how we can utilize creativity and entrepreneurship as a force to create a thriving future together. And today, in addressing the IA-CEPA, I'll be speaking to you from a capacity building lens, and especially how in my work, I've worked together with young people and early stage founders to get started. I'm Indonesian. I'm also a young person. I'm 26. So, I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are around my age group. I'm also an IA member. And as Dan said, I have run my own business in the past. And now I work in an entrepreneurial capacity building program at Deakin University. So our work there is all about empowering, upskilling, and broadening the networks of young founders in Deakin and also more broadly in Melbourne, opening them up to the opportunities that are out there. We provide funding, mentoring, and guidance to make sure that they've got everything that they need to succeed. And that's what, that's the thing that really energizes me and, gets me up every morning. Outside of that, I'll just quickly mention, I also host a podcast where I talk about creativity and how people from various professions are using that in facing the challenges that are coming our way today. And yeah, I think the IA-CEPA, I see it as a fantastic facilitator of new opportunities. Australia and Indonesia, neighboring countries. I think what it's doing is that it's broadening our idea of what's local. I've had the privilege of growing up between Australia and Indonesia. And so I love seeing that this is giving the backing, the incentive for increased connection between people. I think that's amazing. So today I'm particularly excited about exploring why this matters for us, especially as young people and young entrepreneurs, and for young people who are seeking to explore the world of entrepreneurship. And yes, I'll be talking a little bit about how you can prepare for this, who's out there to support you, and how you can activate the right mindset to get started. And on top of that, just mega stoked to be sitting on the panel together with Rebecca and Willix, two individuals whose work I respect so much. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Deeds. And your enthusiasm is infectious because I'm raring to go as well. If you're listening at the moment, you've got questions, feel free to start putting them in the chat and we'll get to them a little bit later on, but feel free to get the first one in because it's more likely that I'll be calling that one out a little bit later. There's a couple of questions I really want to deep dive into for this webinar and see if we can get some answers out the other end. And one of them for me was, well, what does an entrepreneur look like? And Willix, you were saying that you're not an entrepreneur, but you've had the privilege of connecting with entrepreneurs, joining in those companies, freelancer, Bukalapak. What's been some of your observations of entrepreneurs in Australia and Indonesia? What's the common features that you see? What are some of the traits or characteristics that perhaps listeners should be trying to develop?
Yeah, I think, I think there's a difference between, someone who wants to start their own business because that is the only choice, because job opportunities might not look that good. But I think there's also the other type, which I think is really what the true entrepreneurial is, which is, the ones that, really decided to quit their good jobs and started their own company. So making that sacrifice, my boss at Freelancer, his name is Matt. He was he was associate professor in network security. So he had a cushy job, but he decided to actually start his own company. And I think similarly with a few of the founders of Buka as well, they had quite a great job being a management consultant in one of the MBB companies, McKinsey and BCG. So they, and I think ultimately what the common traits that we all share, including me, are the fact that we love what we do, and I think that's what really keeps us at night. And I think the 9 to 5 doesn't really apply because really you're really thinking about this as more of a hobby than a thing that you must do. So we constantly think about the problems that we want to solve, especially in tech companies where to test out ideas and stuff like that. It's very easy to test it out. So really, on top of our mind, I think almost on a 24/7 basis, we think about it almost on a constant basis. And I think, that is the common trait that a lot of the entrepreneurs, especially in tech companies, because I can only speak on behalf of them, share. And I think the fact that we love what we do, and also the fact that it's amazing how tech can solve a lot of problems. In Buka, we even transcend to just e-commerce, right? Initially, we started as e-commerce. Now we became more than that. 40% of our sales right now and revenue come from the fact that we empower the mom and pop stores in Indonesia. So before they can sell maybe 10 SKUs like bottled water and your normal FMCG stuff, with the power of Mitra Bukalapak, which we power 1 million of them now every month, a total 5 million, they can actually end up selling more stuff. And not only that, we build CRM for them, we build mobile point of sales for them, we build ability for them to increase loyalty among their customers. And these are the things that will be quite exciting, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do that without technology. And this is what keeps us at night, to think about what are the things we can do for them and stuff like that.
And Rebecca, as someone who's working in a trade organization, you're trying to support these passions that people like Willix have, that's keeping them up at night. How do you do that? How do you support them? And what are some of the interesting characters perhaps you've seen who have been entrepreneurs that you've passed through in your career?
Fantastic. I was getting really excited with that question too, because the very definition of who's an entrepreneur, and I think in public service, there is space and a need for more entrepreneurial thinking. Now, I'm not suggesting we take risks or we do anything that is not in line with our code of conduct, but the notion of the entrepreneur inside an organisation or inside public service, I think, is so important. I've had most of my career in public service, but it's also predominantly been in international education. So for me, the idea of co-design, co-creation and working with your stakeholders to come up with a policy solution is completely natural, and in fact, the only way we can do it. How could I meet a student's need if I don't understand their pain points or otherwise? But of course, not everyone in public service or coming from different policy areas in public service has the luxury or the ability to do that. And I'm focusing on that because I do think government is both an enabler or a barrier to growth. We have to play both roles, but the goal is to find the right things to unlock and the right things to hold and to protect. And I think that's a challenge of public service or of regulation. And it kind of brings me back to my first point around the IA-CEPA and the legality around that, but also how we can be creative in implementing it. For me, the people that I see do it best, you're exactly right. A trade agency that has traditionally functioned on face-to-face visits, relationships, trade missions, all of that, we have had to pivot just as hard as anyone else has. And we have that, I think passion has been a word that we've all used. I know people in our team have that passion to go, if I can open this opportunity for the dairy exporter to get their milk to Indonesia, that's going to make a difference. So we are driven by that. I also think it's a risk this time of, we're coming to the end of 2020. We've all been lifting and working so hard as well. So I think there's a real conversation, and it's been more prevalent this year, I think, than ever, around how do we make sure that we're not pushing ourselves too hard around that? How do we make sure that we're supporting ourselves with other people to help us know when to keep pushing, keep driving for change, or when to take a step back and revisit that. The characteristics that we see or that we're looking for, either in companies or in individuals that we want to work with us, are common. They're those who are resilient, those who are agile, proactive, but ultimately those who are also focused and know where their effort will get them the best results. So I think these are common, I mean, it's almost a common language that we can curate and that we can use to transcend some of the, you know, the technicalities of how we might work in education here versus in a province in Indonesia. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Not very well structured, but I'm sure Diletta's got some views on this too.
Yes, love to hear from Deeds, and particularly, I think as someone who exudes passion just right off the screen, if there's people in the chat who are thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm passionate about, or, you know, what's going to be my mission, perhaps do you have anything about finding that and really, you know, driving that?
Yeah, for sure. But before I do that, there is something I just want to quickly tear down, and that is the over glamorization of the idea of what an entrepreneur is, right? It's so much more than having a custom printed t-shirt with your Fiverr generated logo on it and pitching at a few hackathons. And we're seeing a lot of that emerging right now, and I love the enthusiasm. But it really is about that willingness to roll your sleeves up and hustle. You know, Willix hinted earlier that, you know, he's always worked with tech companies, and then Rebecca used the words resilient, agile, and focused. These are the things that you have to be willing to do to pursue entrepreneurship, because the trade-off that you're making in exploring this is that you're leaving the cushion and security of a salaried job and all the luxuries that come with that to solve the problem that you give so much of a damn about, and you've got to live and breathe it. And that's what we see the most successful and passionate entrepreneurs exude. It's that obsession that sometimes is verging on crazy, but also just their willingness to really hustle for it. And what I really love that's recently come up through the work of Blackbird Ventures, venture capital firm here in Australia, is their focus on creativity, and that they're actually investing in nurturing creativity in young people as well, because entrepreneurs are individuals who are willing to see the world through a different lens and approach problems in a different way. And I think that's what's needed in the world today, given that the influence of technology is bringing, you know, unprecedented change. And then, you know, layering on top of that a pandemic and so on and so forth. I think this attitude of agility, or this nature of agility, is definitely core to what it means and what it takes.
Awesome. And that's got me thinking, I mean, the competitive advantage that a lot of listeners have is that they're in some ways connected to both Australia and Indonesia. And Willix, you touched on this, that tech's a really quick, fast-moving business, and you've got a lot of Melbourne University graduates. You've got a lot of people who've studied in Australia or lived in Australia but are Indonesian, or vice versa. What different perspective does that bring to a business like Bukalapak?
I think, you know, like the fact that, and I think this is the best thing about tech as well, is that, you know, it really doesn't matter where you come from, right? And, you know, and coding and engineering, you know, even, you know, business, operations, leadership, and stuff like that. Those can come from, you know, any sorts of the world, as long as you're capable of doing the job. So you know, we like to hire leaders, especially in the fields that we still think that Indonesia is lacking. So, you know, software engineering, for example. So we tend to hire the likes of the folks in Amazon or you know, or other places in Silicon Valley to try to teach us and to try to lead the team of, you know, up and coming Indonesian software engineers. So I think, and, you know, and that's the same thing with Australia, where we tend to find people with the skills that have already done it. And, you know, Australia has already seen the rise of tech companies before Indonesia did, right? With the likes of Atlassian, Freelancer, you know, even before that, like Seek or real estate and stuff like that. So that give us gives me the edge to be able to hire those people to come to Indonesia. And the fact that it's very close, that kind of makes them more interested as well to come to Indonesia and work with Buka to try to essentially solve the problems that we are all very excited to solve and tap into the opportunities that Indonesia has.
Rebecca, one of the things that struck me was you mentioned ecosystems. And that means that you can't just have the lone Australian in Indonesia. That's not an ecosystem in of itself. It's about having a community there and likewise having a community of Indonesians here in Australia. As someone who, all things being equal, would be traveling a lot in your role and tapping into these communities, what would you like to see in the next couple of years from IA-CEPA in terms of building an ecosystem of young entrepreneurs between Australia and Indonesia?
Yeah, great question. And I'm sure there are many different answers to that. But one of the things that I think, given we've specifically put young entrepreneurs in the title of this conversation, this isn't unique to Indonesia. I see it in our work around the world. We're actually having two different conversations. And that's okay to be having a conversation that is still in the, I don't want to use old school, in the traditional way of business development or trade or diplomacy versus the more dynamic and disruptive conversations. Now, you could say that is an old and young or a old and new. So what I would love to see is actually how we bring those conversations together in a meaningful way. And also how I think there's a lot to be done bilaterally, but there is also a huge opportunity for us across the region. So given commitments to ASEAN in the last couple of weeks, to the broader multilateral environment around Southeast Asia, I think there's a huge opportunity for us not to just be doing it or having that conversation one-to-one or bilaterally, but broadening that out. The fact that we can still conduct most of our business, and in fact some of our business even better due to the digital platforms that we have right now, I don't think we have fully taken advantage of that. And ecosystem mapping, connecting, maximizing can all be enabled through this process. So I'd love to see the continuation of traditional people-to-people programs like the Australia-Indonesia Youth Exchange Partnership, but I'd love to see them augmented or improved into a hybrid model that enables us to not just do that in a 3-week environment. Of course, our hosts and partners here in IA, I know you are absolutely straddling that conversation, and this is your part of your mission as well. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be an easy fix, but I think if we can channel and harness passion and people, then and align with our purpose, we will create the ecosystem that will deliver that outcome. I do have to talk, because we're talking entrepreneurship. Money is also a big part of this, and where we invest our resources is a sign of what we value as well. So in building an ecosystem, what are we showing by where we're putting our money? And I'm not here to tell you about the Victorian budget, but I would say where governments put their money is a sign of where we see growth and opportunity, and where we maybe want to change the conversation or change the opportunities and work differently, whether it's in new energy, whether it's in our ecosystem for entrepreneurship. So not very clear, but I'm looking for comments from others on that.
Great point to raise about money there. And one of the ones I wanted to sort of hone in on is the creative arts industry, which Deeds, I know that you're very well involved in. I mean, I can't walk down the street without seeing someone wearing a batik shirt or something like that here in Sydney. That's not new, tech is new and shiny, but there's been trade and commerce between Australia and Indonesia, an exchange of arts for a long time. What can we be doing more in that area? Where might young entrepreneurs, put their efforts in that area of the Australia-Indonesia relationship?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we're talking about it in the sense of business and trade and young creative entrepreneurs who want to explore foreign markets, I think there's a huge, I suppose, effort that needs to be made in understanding your market in the other country, and switching on your empathy antennas to observe how they're interacting with one another. And lucky for us, in this generation and as young people, we have social media as sort of like a window and an equalizer to tap into that, to access that. And I've seen, businesses, small to medium size, thrive by tapping into that and doing it really well. A really good example is Suku, which is a luxury homeware brand founded by an Indonesian creative entrepreneur who's based here in Melbourne. And she's used her advantage as an Indonesian person to, work together ethically with Indonesian artisans, and then bringing the crafts and, the luxury goods over here into Australia and tapping into like a particular fashion niche or community. So I think it's definitely an activity, a listening activity that needs to be done. I mean, in other words, that's market research, that's validation, that's traction and surveying your potential audience.
Fantastic. And some of those last terms you use are obvious, they're clear steps what you can do next. And I know at the start you flagged that you wanted to talk a little bit about, how you could activate some of the ideas that people listening might have. What are the next steps they can take on this journey? I want to open that up to you and give you this space. What should people be doing as their, first or second step about being an entrepreneur?
Thank you for asking. And this is actually my favorite answer. The first thing to note is that you don't have to know it all. You don't have to be an Australia expert. You don't have to be an Indonesia expert. The great thing about, being a human being is that you can build community, you can expand your networks, you can team up with other people who are guns at what they do. You can team up with other people who are guns at understanding a particular local market or network area, and tap into that. So there's a few that exist that operate between Australia and Indonesia, business incubators and startup communities that you can be a part of. One that's based out of Melbourne, and they recently opened an office in Jakarta as well, is the 11th Space, and they're a business incubator. And at the moment, they have a program where they're training up young entrepreneurs to build their these skill sets, lead and startup methodologies, pitching, business validation, all of that, specifically in the context of Australia, Indonesia. There's also Block 71, which operates mainly in Southeast Asia, and that's a program that's being run by NUS Enterprise in Singapore, funded by Halim Group. And that's another startup / entrepreneurship network that you can be a part of. It just depends on what your jam is and what your flavor is in the terms of like the type of community that you want to be involved with. There will be a crowd out there for you to tap into. There's Global Shapers, that's the youth arm of the World Economic Forum. There's Techstars Startup Weekend that's been running online now. There's AIYA, obviously, and you guys are also talking about entrepreneurship, which is awesome. So if you are interested in expanding, I would say that's the first thing you should do. Get that local knowledge by pairing up with a local buddy.
Fantastic. And I think that brings us back a little bit to Willix. You were mentioning how, you paired up with the three founders of Bukalapak, and then that took you on your journey there. What were you looking for when you were looking to pair up? Were you looking for complementary skill sets? Were you looking just for a vision that really got you excited? What was that thought process like, taking you back a couple of years now, at what, I guess, looking back would sort of be, the start of a really rocket journey for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it is the fact that I think, we can challenge each other, and, obviously the roles are very different. I came in as a COO. some of them were CTO, CFO, and CEO. So really, I think is the variety of skills that very important. Variety of the skills that would be very good to have. So a lot of the time, hear a lot of tech entrepreneurs. They say that they can't find proper CTO and stuff like that. So that will not work, obviously. So I think the type of founders that you want to find and co-found companies together. Definitely don't do it yourself because that's too much stress. And it's a very stressful thing, right? It's very easy to think about and glorify this role, but it is very stressful. Some people get stressed and they lost a lot of weight. Unfortunately for me, I get stressed and I put a lot of weight. I think so. Don't do it yourself. And I think the key also when you have the mental when you want to find co-founders, try to not do it in an even number, because as a result of that, you might get stagnant in decisions. So like 3, 5 would be good. 7 is probably too much because then people just don't really put in the effort. So 3 is usually the magic number. 5 if you have to. And I think people that can share the same vision. And most of the time you find best friends to do it. But again, like just be careful with that, because most of the time you lose that best friend because because sometimes it's a very crazy world to be an entrepreneur, and I think those are probably the practical advice that I could give. So yeah, I think definitely, I think don't do it yourself. Some people do, but I think there's too much stress to have.
That's a great advice. And we've got a question here from Brahma. I have a plan to run a social entrepreneurial project. How to get investors for social entrepreneurs. Rebecca, you mentioned money is a big factor for entrepreneurs these days. Did you have any advice for Brahma?
Yeah, absolutely. I think building on the idea of partnership or finding your niche, but also following the money. So I think in our context, we have local, state and federal government. Each of those have an interest in creating prosperity, jobs and an entrepreneurial community. So I think in Victoria, we could start in Melbourne, but we go to Geelong, we go to our other cities. So the role of your city in helping you support your endeavours, I think should not be overlooked. I started my first job was actually in local government. So I am a big fan of the role of local government, but I've also seen where a small investment, particularly around social entrepreneurship, if you're looking at starting at a local scale, can make a huge difference. I know in Victoria, we've had a big focus on social entrepreneurship, and I believe we're updating our strategy and policy settings on that as well. But I guess I'd link back to my first comments too around whilst a lot of social entrepreneurship solutions may start local or may be local, they are common problems that we're trying to solve. So I do think it's about maximising your networks, looking in places and finding people that you can work with, not just being wedded to the idea or the love of the idea, but also understanding the resources and the people that it's going to take to deliver on that. I do just want to bring in a personal story, and I hope she's not listening today, but I was once young and am now a mother of 2 young women, 22-year-old and 14-year-old. So I'm also living through the experience of I think quite a changed perception of what you can do in terms of creating your life's work and not being pushed into here's a teaching job, here's a job you should do. And I think we are just on the cusp of unlocking that value, and I think that's also going to have to change the types of programs and support. But I actually know this this generation, and all of you on the call, I'm sure as well, will create those opportunities without government, without needing government to be there. So hopefully we just get out of the way and let that innovation flow.
I might just tack on there that not only local government, but universities are a great place to start with some incubators or even some grants as well.
Indeed. I did mean, thank you for reminding me. I've had a distraction here who's come to join me for the conversation. You're exactly right. So at the institutional level, and let us just put Spark Deakin in there as an example, and Willix, a graduate from University of Melbourne, but our institutions are, I think, world-class in the service and the support that they're offering. The key is how we scale it and how we make sure that any student who wants to access those programs can access them. And I think COVID's helped us scale that. But also in international education, I started international education 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we weren't talking about the student experience. We weren't talking about where do our graduates go. The role of government in funding that, in addition to the money that was released this week for for Launch Victoria, there's also been a significant input into employability programs with Victorian institutions to support students. And I think there's a huge opportunity around that. The programs, the acronym that we used when we first launched the programs 4 years ago was around LIVE. We wanted to lead, innovate, volunteer, and experience, and finding programs that suited each student or each program area as well. So yeah, I think we can certainly share as a follow-up to this call as well, a lot of those links of the programs as well. And if your institution is not delivering it well, then you should ask. We should help create that.
And did you have any comments on that? I know you're leading part of the entrepreneur program, Spark Deakin. So what's something, for example, that they're doing over there to help facilitate young entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 3 different flagship programs. The first one is an accelerator. I think university accelerators are fantastic if you're early stage or pre-seed, because we don't actually take equity in your startup. It's basically a grant. It's basically free money, and you've got super patient and caring mentors who really just want to see you succeed and thrive. Like, that's what we get paid to do. And that's not to say that VCs don't do the same. In fact, they do it in a different way because they've got skin in the game. Typically, they take 5% of your company or whatever. But bringing it back to Spark Deakin, and I also want to spotlight the other university programs because we might have people here from other unis. Melbourne Uni, Monash, RMIT all have excellent startup support programs as well. So you just want to tap into that and see what opportunities are available for you. Mostly it'll be in the form of funding, mentoring, and the broadening of your networks. If you're new to the space, it might feel very alienating. Like, I remember the first time I went to the Goods Shed, which is where LaunchVic is housed in Victoria. I felt like such an outsider, and having being able to access that through the university space kind of feels like having training wheels or just a hand to hold, so that you're not going through it alone. And an introduction also goes a long way.
Great advice. Another question we have is from Joe from Melbourne, and I might direct this one to you, Willix. The question is cultural and language familiarity a prerequisite to a stronger entrepreneurship between Australia and Indonesia? And I guess the way I interpret that is are you the face of entrepreneurship, someone who's come from Indonesia, studied at Australia, gone and done, I think, further postgraduate study in the United States? Or is there, local Indonesians who haven't been able to leave the country, are they also able to build a similar entrepreneurial journey that you have?
Yeah, I think that is the best thing. Again, I'm just purely saying the tech, right? That's the best thing about tech companies. That's the best thing about tech startups. You don't have to be educated overseas. Right? my founders came from ITB, so and similar with our competitor Tokopedia, the founders came from Indonesian university. I mean, there are some of the unicorns that were founded by ex-Harvard, ex-Brown University, at Stanford. But again, I don't think that, I think as long as and that's the best thing about tech, that's the best thing about programming, we all speak the same language. So I don't think that would be necessarily a problem. And I don't think that would necessarily be inhibitor. The only thing I would say though, is that what I learned, from being in Australia and also in the States are the fact that I managed to build a better network. As the investors that we have, and to be honest, most of the investors that are more interested in Indonesia tend to come from, non-Indonesian investors, which is because they are excited about the opportunities in Indonesia. So I guess having that network kinds of help, but I don't necessarily think that is the biggest problem.
I'll have a go on that one too, Dan, if I could, because I think cultural awareness, obviously, in my line of business, in trade and investment, is everything. Unfortunately, Australians do not have a great reputation for our our numbers in learning a second language. So I think in the absence of, if we are not able to have the language knowledge, the cultural awareness and cultural sensitivity is everything. And I do think we underestimate how important that is, particularly for leaders who may have been working in a different time or a different environment. But luckily, we have great resources and programs to build cultural awareness, and it's on all of us to continue to invest in that. I think the second piece of the question is picking up on Willix as well, to talk about that common language. I do think entrepreneurship has a common language, and that there's an opportunity to build on that common cultural aspect, and then to have that desire to learn, to share and to collaborate. It's that mindset that will take us further. Language, of course, will be a great asset in that. And the final, I think, and this is what the opportunities in IA-CEPA are presenting too, is all of this is about a partnership. So trying to do it on your own and to create, in my environment, create a product that is exportable and ready to be sold to 240 million in Indonesia, you would never do it on your own. So building the right partnerships and building the right cultural partnerships of a partner you can trust in Indonesia, partners you can trust here, and then your team. I mean, that's the winning formula.
Fantastic. And there's a direct question here which I'd like to get the panel's thoughts on. Any advice for a translation, transcreation, which I Googled, a startup business? We're talking about language and the advantages it gives. Obviously, there's a lot of translation that occurs from some of these bilateral talks. I might start with you, Willix. As someone who's deep in the tech, I almost thought that maybe translation's dead because we have things like Google Translate and all these tech solutions. Do you still see a place for translation services, and what do you see for that in the future?
Yeah, I think there is actually a couple of companies that did that already. Mostly hiring, I came from freelancer.com, mostly hiring freelancers of those languages. However, I think it's too much of a niche if you just focus on English Indonesia. So maybe the company should probably transcend to more global translation network. That's definitely, it's always still required, right? As much as the AI and Google Translate and NLP is doing really well, there's always the nuances and, sorry, not nuances, there's always the, the things that those AI and the NLP products cannot capture. So I think, it makes sense, but maybe more as a global company than just as a Indonesian, Australian English, so to say.
Great. And actually, I think there's one last question here, which is a good one to sort of get us out on, and I'll invite everyone from the panel to have a quick answer. It's, what opportunity do you think is the most feasible between Indonesian and Australian youths, besides exporting more meat goreng into Coles and Woolies? So I guess maybe this would be to, take yourself back to when you were 20 years old and you've got this grand idea of something to sell or do between Australia and Indonesia. What would you suggest? I'm putting you on the spot. I must admit my one was Indonesian fashion. So there was a time in Australia where it was on the rage that you'd have, a plain shirt and then the pocket square would be, a different color. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if that was a batik little patch? I'd make so much money with that idea. So there's my low-hanging fruit idea for anyone out there who wants to try and take that one off.
I'll go next and also relate a personal story. So I think the answer is whatever makes your heart sing, whatever you'll be able to sustain a passion for and a commitment to. And for me, I spent my first job out of university was actually teaching English in Japan. And when I came home, it was the first time I'd actually lived away from home. I was there on my 21st birthday. So I came home and I thought, I want to continue to connect communities. And I actually had a little business which was bringing calligraphy teachers, so calligraphy students who were older Japanese women who never would have really travelled. It wasn't culturally appropriate, or not culturally appropriate, it wasn't a done thing. And I did tours here to Brisbane. So I would say one that was not very long lasted, but it was a really fun time when I did it. But it was about those people-to-people connections. And I think there is a huge interest and opportunity for us to build more of those programs and for entrepreneurs to help us do that bigger and better.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. Deeds, Willix, do you have an idea that you might want to suggest?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. Look, I think there's a lot of really fun things that we could do together, especially your one, Dan. If you want to pursue that, let me know. But I wanted to bring this into, I guess, an area that we haven't really touched on today, and where I think a real opportunity is the economic disparity that still exists, both within Australia and within Indonesia, right? We talk about the IA-CEPA in a big business sense, and all of us are also, I recognize, coming from really privileged positions. But who's getting left behind, right? Who's going to benefit from this, and how can we be inclusive in empowering, people who are still maybe in areas in provinces in Indonesia where there isn't as much access to the internet or knowledge, and they are still at a disadvantage. And I think that's the real awesome opportunity to explore here, to make sure that we're looking after everyone.
Fantastic. Willix, that's a hard act to follow. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. And I think obviously being someone in commerce business is always about commerce and money. Maybe a marketplace between export and import between both. I think there's a huge interest between the government and also state government as well to try to promote both exports and imports from Indonesia, especially mostly on the local small and medium entrepreneurs. Small and medium enterprise. So I think there is required to probably have a marketplace and have a system to allow that transparency, to allow the seamless trade between both sides, which I think is one of the biggest challenges right now. It's very hard to import certain things from Australia and vice versa, especially when you're SME. So I think that would be something that would be quite interesting. And especially there's a huge interest from both sides of the government as well to do that.
So Willix, should we talk?
Some of the guys there.
We'll get more meat going into Woolworths and Coles soon enough, by the sounds of things. I cannot thank the panel enough for their wonderful insights this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to moderate and to listen. Once again, thank you to Rebecca Hall, Willix Halim, and Diletta Legowo. I will just plug for any of the entrepreneurs out there, next year, IA has funding to do a health hackathon and also a business case competition. So we will be looking for participants, we will be looking for partners, and we're really interested in fostering the upcoming generation in this space. So that's going to be it for us today, but we look forward to engaging with you again in the future. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone.